Hello friends, welcome back to the channel, and today I would like to share with you my mecha model kit Gundam Marker review. And this video has been quite a while in the making, mostly because I wanted to make sure I got enough hands-on experience with most of the subjects of this review, and I also wanted to make sure I didn't make any rush decisions. With that being said, however, this is still very much a personal opinion type of review. I have been building mecha model kits for just over 3 years and have been getting into detailing and customizing gradually over the last 2 years or so please keep that information in mind. Also, some of the markers in this video were provided to me for free or at a reduced price, but all opinions are totally my own. Now let's dive in. In this Gundam Marker roundup, we are going to look at Gundam Markers, Gundam Markers EX, Gundam Markers Regular, Gundam Marker Pearl Type for panel lining, Gundam Marker Soft Fine Tip panel lining marker, and a Gundam Marker Real Touch marker. Then from DSPIAE we have soft tip markers, regular color and metallics, some chrome markers and their eraser marker. Next from Gaahleri I was sent by them a set of their metallic markers that come in this neat tube box. They are also supposed to have their own eraser markers, but I do not have those on hand. Next from AK Interactive I have tried 2 of their marker types. These semi-soft tip real color markers, of which they seem to have a great selection, and these poor type large brush type Playmarkers. Next, from Army Painter, I have been enjoying their speed paint markers. They don't seem to have a very large color selection of them quite yet, but this starter set has some pretty good basics. Next, I've recently acquired some ReStudio chrome markers for testing, and finally, arguably the most widely available option in this lineup is Sharpie markers. These come in a few metallic colors. Now, in terms of the testing approach, we will try all of these options on 2 types of plastic: PS and ABS. I will describe the tip options and the paint flow of these markers. I will also share my personal observations and experience with each marker type. And lastly, we will check the going price and availability of each option. So I have a few spare parts left from my previous perfect grade perfectibility unicorn build that happened to be PS plastic, and some third-party action base stand parts that happen to be ABS. We're gonna use them for testing. So let's start with the most used markers in my experience, the DSPIAE markers. So these markers come in this nice triangular shape, which is pretty easy to handle. They have 3 types of variations: metallic, regular color, and fluorescent. These have a very soft tip similar to Copic markers, and they use acrylic paint. The selection per range is really not that large, but it covers the basics pretty well. I like the tips of these markers as it's not too soft, so you can still use the very end of it for some fine detailing. In particular, it has been super handy when working on inner frames of some model kits. Then we have the DSPIAE chrome markers. These come in 2 types, thick and super fine. I personally have not been able to find these on sale much as of late on AliExpress or elsewhere. And if you still have them, you can actually buy refill bottles for them. Those are still available, but if not, the DSPIAE seems to offer a new set of metallic markers where there is only 1 chrome option included. Nonetheless, these markers are pretty good. I specifically like their super fine marker tip because it is extremely small, so it's nice to work on the fine details. And lastly, from DSPIAE we have their eraser pen marker. This pen actually has a large, thick tip, but it's made of bristles, so it sort of deteriorates over time. These arguably are the best eraser markers I've tried yet. They don't smell too much and last quite a while. Now, in terms of finish, as you can see on the bottom left, the soft tip markers, they actually finish in flat, so the paint doesn't reflect light very much, and in terms of metallics it means that there is not very much shine. It's more of a light neutral sort of finish, but at the same time for the regular colors it looks exceptionally well, I would say, because flat finish makes the paint look more expensive. And for the chrome marker, these have pretty typical chrome glass finish and even surface. What's important when you work with chrome markers obviously is is to let the paint flow and cover the target area in one shot. In terms of the eraser marker on the bottom right corner, you can see that I use it directly on the part here to clean up some paint. It did its job pretty good. However, the best way in my opinion to use the eraser marker from DSPIAE is by dabbing it on an end of a cotton swab, like a super fine and thick cotton swab, and then using that swab to do the paint cleanup. That way you have more control over the cleanup liquid and you can also be much more precise. Now, in terms of plastic interaction, I've used these markers in the past both on first-party and third-party kits. I use them on a variety of different plastics, from POM to ABS to PS to whatever else comes in the middle, and I have not had any problems. Granted, I almost never do complete part repaints, rather fine touch-ups and detailing. In terms of availability, DSPIAE markers are pretty widely available in hobby stores, both locally and online. I personally have gotten them from a lot of different places in the past. On sale, they can sometimes be as cheap as $2 per marker, which is a pretty good deal. Next, we move on to the Rage Studio markers. So, whenever I realized that chrome markers from DSPIAE are no longer widely available, I was looking for an alternative solution, and I came across these Rage Studio chrome markers on AliExpress. They seem to use a hybrid between a hard tip and a fine tip. It's not really as fine as the DSPIAE super fine tip marker, but still pretty good. They also have their own eraser markers, which I decided to test out as well. Their eraser markers use a regular flat hard tip that is slightly angled. In terms of paint finish, the Rage Studio chrome markers seem to have roughly the same finish as the DSPIAE ones, so a pretty standard chrome mirror electroplated look finish. But their erasers unfortunately disappointed me a little bit. I don't think they have a very good solution in them. It seems to create a lot of mud rather than a nice cleanup that the DSPIAE eraser markers achieve. I don't have much experience yet with the Rage Studio markers, but I have tested them on ABS and PS plastic, and I did not notice in the last couple of weeks any sort of damage to the parts after applying the marker. In terms of availability, between me buying these markers on AliExpress a couple of months ago and this video, they seem to be no longer available, under the same listings at least on AliExpress. Nonetheless, if I find the links to the original markers that I bought, I'll provide those in the description, and if not, then just as an FYI if you have access to these markers already. Next, the Army Painter markers. These are the most recent addition to my collection, and these are also a slightly different type of marker. Basically, what Army Painter did is they created their own version of their pre-mixed acrylic speed paint 2.0 that is widely used in the miniature painting hobby, and they put that pre-mixed paint in markers. And these markers have rather thick brushes with fine tips, and the paint is very thin when compared to something like DSPIAE soft tip markers. These markers don't have a very large color selection at the moment, and what's available currently are not basic colors but pre-mixed shades. I have been able to acquire their starter set, which has 10 colors, but I hope they will create more colors in the future. In my experience so far, these markers are mostly for super fine details, for example on the pilot figures for my model kits, or faceplates, or otherwise really fine printed parts where I want to create some layers and I want some shades. Because the paint is very thin, it tends to pull in different crevices on a subject, and that way it looks super realistic with very little effort. Nevertheless, I really like this type of markers because it allows me to get some high quality detail in my paintings of small figures and stuff like that without actually being anywhere good at miniature painting and not having a setup for miniature painting. In terms of availability, I had seen these markers listed at various online hobby shops that usually carry Warhammer stuff, for example, and other traditional model kit stuff, and on marketplaces like Amazon. And in terms of price, these seem to go between 6 to 7 Canadian bucks per marker, or about 60 to 70 Canadian bucks for the starter set. Next, From AK Interactive, we also have these Playmarkers, and these are effectively very similar to the Army Painter speed paint markers. They also have pre-mixed paint, and you need to shake up the marker before you use it. And by the way, both Army Painter and AK Playmarkers need to be activated before you use them. For the Army Painter, you need to use the outside of the cap to press the tip in, and for the AK Playmarker, they have a button on the opposite end from the tip. The AK option, in my opinion, is a cleaner and easier one to use. While Army Painter so far offers only 10 premixed colors, at least at the time of this review, AK seems to offer 34 options, and they all use acrylic paint. I only have a few Playmarker colors in my collection so far, and I've used them to cover up gates in some of my builds or accidental damage before. I find that Playmarkers give you a slightly thicker paint when compared to the Army Painter, but it is still not as thick as DSPIAE, for example. With the Playmarkers, I can still layer the paint, and if I want, create a thicker and even coat on a flat surface. Because these markers have a brush tip, you can also get in some smaller parts, but overall the marker is quite thick, so forget about hard to reach areas on your complete kits. These markers also interact well with PS and ABS plastic, and that applies both to the Army Painter and to the AK Playmarkers. And in terms of price, these are available usually at hobby stores, just like the Army Painter markers. Per marker, the price will vary greatly depending on your location, and can basically go from about €2 to 15 Canadian bucks. If you go for a complete set, I have seen those as low as €70 on AK's own website and as high as 160 Canadian dollars at some hobby local shops. And another one from AK, they also have another line of markers that are called real color markers. These actually have fine, soft-ish tips, pretty similar to the DSPIAE soft tip markers. AK offers 34 color options of these. I find that these have a lot of different bright shades, and I really like these markers for highlighting or fine detail. Quite a few color options are very bright and vibrant, and thanks to the hard tips, the paint does not flow around. It rather sticks to the part, similar to the DSPIAE markers. Plus, the paint on these markers dries pretty quick and dries flat, which looks pretty good on camera. I have been using these markers for some very minor edge lighting or for the fine detail on some pilot figures. For example, I painted my RX-72 pilots with Army Painter markers, and then I added detail with these AK real color markers. I have very limited experience using these markers, especially when compared to something like the DSPIAE ones that I've used for years now, but I have used these AK real color markers on ABS and PS plastics and have not observed any damage. In terms of availability and price, similar to the Army Painter and the other AK markers, these seem widely available in hobby shops, and I have also seen them pop up in some GUNPLA stores lately. You can buy these individually for your specific highlighting needs or as a set of 34. In terms of price, your mileage will once again vary quite a bit. I have seen individual ones go for as low as about €2, and their set of 34 for about €60 on the AK website, and in stores I have seen these go as low as 3 Canadian bucks and as high as $6 a marker, and for the set I've seen them go from 120 to 200 Canadian bucks depending on the marketplace and the variation of the set. Next we have Gaahleri markers. Just to be absolutely transparent with you, these markers were provided to me by the brand for free. They did not pay me for a review or had any sort of input on my take on this product. For the Gaahleri, I have their set of 10 metallic markers, which come in this nice cute looking tube box. Some colors in this selection are rather close to each other and can only be distinguished under pretty bright light upon close examination. The tips on these markers are a bit unusual as well. These are basically a hybrid between a hard plastic white tip, but in shape of a soft tip marker and more angular than that of an AK real color marker. As a result, you have pretty thin acrylic water-based paint that you need to allow to flow and fill and gradually cover your surface area that you want to paint. The paint dries fairly quick, but not instantly. Give the part a few minutes after application for the paint to settle. At the end, you get a semi-gloss finish. The paint will catch and reflect some light, but it won't look glossy or as flat as the DSPIAE metallic markers. In my personal experience, I've been using these markers for slightly, maybe over a month or 2 months approximately, and I've come to appreciate their reliability. I have not had any paint flow or tip dry out issues yet, and the resulting coverage is actually quite sturdy and is accepting to touch-ups as well. In my most recent build of the Wolf Technology Barbados Lupus Flex, I used the aluminum Gaahleri markers to cover some inner frame forearm pipes. Even though I managed to carelessly damage some of the paint while posing, a few touch-ups blended those blemishes pretty well. These markers are not perfect, however. While their hard, fine tip has lots of pros, it also has a pretty noticeable con, and that is paint flicks and splashes. This issue is a common one to all hard tips, arguably, but because Gaahleri uses a much finer tip, it encourages you to work on smaller and harder to reach parts and details. But when you do so, if you happen to flick the marker tip off an end of a part or a groove, the inner spring of the tip will create an annoying paint splash. And the other con is pigment. You need to shake these markers pretty well to mix up the pigment before you apply them, and even if you do, some shades like the aluminum or dark iron will have pretty consistent pigment coverage, while some other colors like red copper have been very patchy and their pigment tends to pull towards the edges of grooves, making it very hard to achieve even coverage of a flat surface. In terms of availability, I have seen the Gaahleri markers on AliExpress, Amazon and their official website. I have not seen them listed as singles, either as bundles of 2, 6 or this set of 10. And in terms of price, if you check out my affiliate link with the brand, you can grab a set of 10 for about $28 before discount. And elsewhere, the price for this set is around 40 Canadian bucks. Next, we have first of the Gundam markers. This is a Gundam Real Touch marker. This is one of the markers that actually is double-sided. One side is a super duper fine tip and the other side is a thicker but still fine tip, very similar to the AK Real Color markers. These markers are super handy for shading. Even though you can still use them to cover up even surfaces, in an even coat of paint, the paint is not very thick and it also tends to dry rather shiny. It's not really the best for cover-up of large surfaces, in my opinion, so what I tend to use these for is shading on darker plastic that has a lot of edges and grooves. I came across this technique a while ago on the GUNPLA subreddit, and basically what you do is apply a bunch of ink on an edge or the groove on the darker part with this Real Touch marker, and then quickly smudge it up with something like a Q-tip. As a result, you will have this spread out grime or shade which will look like weathering or aging from distance. It's not as clean as panel lining those edges or grooves, which is precisely the point of this method. For extra effect, I would suggest adding some dry brushing on top, and you can also apply decals before doing this shading method, and this will make the decals look a bit aged and weathered as well. Also, in my experience, these markers do not seem to have any negative interactions with PS or ABS plastic. And of course, this super fine tip makes it so you can easily do some writing or fine art on your kits. The ink flow seems pretty consistent, so it might be worth a shot. In terms of availability, these markers are pretty ubiquitous. I saw them in countless brick-and-mortar stores and online stores, priced at around 4 Canadian bucks a pop, or about 20 to 30 bucks for a set of 5. These also have a few color variations. I personally have never bought anything but a few variations of gray and just blacks, because I use them for shading only. If I manage to find it, I will link the original Reddit post for this shading technique, but if not, I will link one of my recent builds where I employed this method on the weapon detailing. Next, we have another Gundam marker, the Pour type specifically. This marker has hard fine tip with a very thin alcohol-based ink that flows via capillary action, similar to what you get by using Tamiya or Steady panel lining solutions. This marker type is a pretty good beginner-friendly option to try your hand at panel lining in a safe and easy way. This ink also seems harmless to ABS plastic, but there will be a disclaimer a bit later about that, so please stay tuned for the rest of the video. I personally don't have much experience with this type of markers. I used it only maybe once or twice at the very beginning of my journey before switching to Tamiya liners, model kit washes, and more recently steady water-based liners. But from what I can gather, these markers cover some basic color variations and are sold in sets and singles. For a single, the going price is about 5 Canadian bucks and around 20 for a set of 6. Also, similar to the Real Touch Gundam markers, these are truly ubiquitous and easy to come by both in person and online. Next in the Gundam marker lineup is the Fine Tip or Felt Tip one. This is pretty much your fine tip or line drawing pen, but under Gundam brand, and they use alcohol-based ink as well. With this marker, you need to drag the fine tip along the groove or line as the ink will not flow on its own. The resultant panel lines might be pretty thick and the color might look a little thin or watery. You can also choose to use this marker for some fine painting or sketching on your kit. I personally have never used this marker for panel lining. I do very rarely use it for some fine touch-ups and shading if there is a color match with the kit that I'm working on. In terms of price and availability, these go for about 5 Canadian bucks a pop. They have 3 basic colors, brown, gray and black, and can be found in most GUNPLA stores both online and in person. Next in the Gundam marker group, we have the Gundam Marker EX. These markers use a traditional wide hard angle tip and rely on ink flow to fill in a part or section. The EX line of Gundam markers specifically is designed to help you achieve the hollow effect that changes depending on the angle of observation. The pigment seems to be quite large glitter flakes, and those also tend to pull towards the edges. Make sure to shake the marker very well before use, and also keep in mind the high and low areas of the part that you're trying to cover, so be extra careful, I guess, when applying this paint. I personally have used these EX type markers on PS and ABS plastic, and in terms of issues, I will cover those in just a minute. But because the paint flows so easily, you can choose to fill in a panel line with this halo effect paint, for example, as you can see here on the blue part. Similar to the previous Gundam markers, these are very easy to come by both in person and online. They are a little bit pricier, going for about 10 Canadian bucks a marker. And the last member of the Gundam marker category is their most basic detailing color marker. These markers are basically the same shape and tip as the EX ones, and technically in this line you have also basic Gundam colors, you also have fluorescent and metallic colors. Unlike the EX markers, these have pretty good and consistent pigment distribution, as long as you are careful when you apply it. When using this marker, make sure to be patient and let the paint evenly coat the desired area. If you do a quick zigzag, like I did here on the white part, the result might disappoint you, but using the same marker on this blue ABS part, you can see a fairly decent even coat of brown. It dries fairly quickly and it dries somewhat flat. In my opinion, these markers are a great option for like part recoloring if you don't have access to or don't want to use other tools like brushes or airbrushes. These markers also use alcohol-based ink. With that being said, however, there is a very important thing to keep in mind about the Gundam markers, especially the ones with these flat tips. These markers rely on you applying a fair amount of ink to a part, and in my experience, I have had several instances where these markers completely ate through some parts and ruined them. In my example here, I used the brown marker on the blue part, ABS part, but it's a very thick part. If you use these markers on smaller ABS parts, they will eat through them in no time and will ruin those parts. I had this unfortunate thing happen most recently during my PGU New Gundam build, as the fingertips and one set of hands there are ABS and they have pretty bad git marks. I wanted them covered up. A big mistake on my part. I had to glue some parts back in place after some urgent cleanup with a thinner, and ended up using AK Playmarker to cover up the original and newly added by me damage to those hands. So be extra careful when using Gundam markers. And last but not least on the list is an option that is arguably the most widely available, Sharpie markers. Sharpie has this line of metallic permanent fine tip markers in some of the most common colors. The tip is a bit of a mix between the AK Real Color and the DSPIAE Soft Tip with oil-based paint. These markers are maybe not the most user-friendly option too. It can be a little bit trickier to get an even coat of paint as it barely flows, as you can see here on the white part, but if you give it a couple of layers, you can get a somewhat even gapless coat. The paint dries pretty much instantly and the finish is semi-flat-ish. It does give off a bit of a shine, but it's not as glossy as Gaahleri and it's not as flat as DSPIAE metallics. These markers are super easy to come by and I frequently see them offered for about 4 Canadian bucks a pop. And that, my friends, rounds up the detailed per marker breakdown. I know that this list is not exhaustive in terms of selection and the test and approach. I'm sure I will be doing revisions in the future. Nevertheless, this particular selection is comprised of my personal choices and experience after a little over 3 years in the model kit hobby. I also used this spare thruster part from the same unicorn build a couple of years ago and applied all of the markers next to each other and label them. You can see for reference how they look once dry and how they reflect the light. I recommend doing something similar either on a spare plastic neutral color part or a sheet of white paper. Apply and label all of your markers for easy reference in the future. It will save you a lot of time when you're trying to find the right shade or the right marker somewhere in your collection, and instead of digging through that, you just look at that sheet and you can easily find the right one for you. If I was to pick favorites or recommend any of these to a new builder, I would split the recommendations per category. For super easy and safe panel lining, try Gundam Fine Tip marker. See if it is for you. And if it doesn't work out, it's still a liner pen. For super easy and fine detailing with basic and metallic colors, I think DSPIAE are a good option, but mind the drying tips. You might have to deal with them. If you don't care about basic colors and want to use metallics only for your detailing jobs and minor color corrections, I think that Gaahleri metallics are a pretty good option. For some super easy shading, Gundam Real Touch markers are honestly the goats. If you want to try your hand out at pilot painting similar to what Warhammer miniature painting looks like, and you don't want to invest in brushes and paints, I think Army Painter and AK Playmarkers are an awesome and newbie-friendly option. And lastly, for your chrome details. If you can find them, I strongly recommend the original DSPIAE chrome superfine and thick chrome markers. If those are completely gone, don't fret. There seems to be a lot of different options available on different marketplaces for effectively chrome electroplated markers. Get some of them, try them out. The Ray Studio seems to be quite alright. And that, my friends, is about it. I know this video is rather heavy on detail and information, and the visual part is pretty boring, but I really wanted to share all this knowledge and experience in one place. If you're new to this hobby or simply new to the markers and wanted to make sense of various options, I hope that this video will come in handy. In terms of links to the markers, as I mentioned earlier, for transparency, Gaahleri have provided their markers for free for review. I've acquired all the other markers myself. In terms of Gundam markers and DSPIAE markers, for the most part I buy them from Gundam Extra, which is actually the new sponsor of this channel. So if you are in Canada and you're shopping for your GUNPLA tools or model kits or Gundam Markers or GSI Creos stuff, they are my go-to store personally, and I'm really grateful that they chose to sponsor this channel now. And if you are ever shopping for third-party kits or like Hot Toys figures, Gundam is my go-to place there. They've been supporting the channel for a long time. You just review our code SKH and it will also greatly support the channel, and I really appreciate you doing so. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Be sure to drop a like if you like this video and a comment if you really do. Subscribe for more cool content like this, and I live stream every Saturday, so hop on over and hang out. Also, all of my gear and tools are listed in the description of all of my videos. Some of the links are affiliates and some give you nice discounts. And every time you use them, you help me make more and even cooler videos. I also recently started a Facebook community page where I post high-res pictures of my builds and various other community updates. Check out the link in the description and join it. I would love to see you all share your builds out there. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.